Welcome to Mental Misdeeds, everybody. We're back live Tuesday evening, not afternoon. It could be afternoon somewhere. I'm your boy, your best friend, the degenerate king, the spicy Italian, the infamous Caleb Salvatore. Here, as always, with my co-host.
Hi, I'm Dre. Also Italian, but a little less full of myself.
It's always so much shorter of an intro. I fucking love it. It's always so much shorter. We got a great guest that we're gonna vibe really well with today, but I guess we'll go over a few news items before we get started. Lizzo.
Oh my God,
this?
I was hoping you would say this.
Lizzo,
Yes.
Lizzo has been canceled by the woke mob for using the word spaz in her song, which is ironic because I always figured that either heart disease or type 1 diabetes would end Lizzo, but I was mistaken. Yeah. So, I mean, you don't use the word spaz, you retards.
Yeah, it's only people from two countries that had a problem with that, and neither one of them are the U.S. And here we have been using the spaz as like kids are real spaz. You can't sit still for eons. And I'm sorry, it's not derogatory. It's not about people who have, spastic whatever conditions. We're not talking about those people. That'd be rude.
You can use slurs towards your kid too. My parents called me a retard all the time. So like, what are you gonna do? You know? No, not really. I probably got called out a couple times, but I probably had it come in. So, that was really the only news item I wanted to cover real quick here. Just real quick. I don't know. Did you have anything?
Like, yeah, that's all. I haven't watched any of the January 6th pearl clutching bullshit going on. I can't stomach it.
No, because it's all the same tired narrative. Nothing's like that they've just regurgitated over and over and over.
Like, I think I tuned in for about 2 minutes, and I can typically listen to a congressional hearing for like an hour, 2 hours maybe. Like, if it's interesting at all, I can typically sit there and listen, especially if they're hammering somebody. But this, I'm just like, oh my God, nauseate. Yeah. I can't.
Well, and the last thing was the Patriot Front group that was arrested outside of a pride rally for conspiracy to riot. Did you see that?
I saw a short video of some guy running away from a cop and another cop telling him that like he can't arrest him and he better leave him alone.
So let me pull up the image from the arrest real quick on Google. Tell me if you notice anything. Okay. So I have never been arrested. I have been cuffed, but I've never been arrested.
It's super fun, Caleb.
What's that?
I said it's super fun. You should try it.
I'm good. It was a misunderstanding, too. I wasn't breaking the law when I was cuffed, for the record. So here's the picture. Now, I've never been arrested, but look at this gentleman on the left over here. Why would they let you keep a backpack on after they had cuffed you? Like, this is supposedly this big terrorist political, extremist group. This guy could have bombs, ammunition, knives, and you let him keep the backpack on. You let him keep their masks on. Like, come on.
I'm sorry. This looks like a fucking group of Fed boys.
Absolutely. You want to know
uniform.
You want to know how I know? You really want to know how I know?
Because they do it every time they try to do this.
There's two reasons. Yeah. Shit. Number one, they do it every time. Number two, they're all in shape. Like those patriot militias that you always see. There's always one or two guys that's like built like a pregnant woman. You know what I mean? Like they're like 300 or 300-pound guys. Like there's none. They're all in good shape. Bullshit. They're feds. Should we pull up our guest?
Yeah, let's do it. Sorry, we
went on a tangent. The first 5 minutes when we have a guest is always, news headlines, just quick hitting shit. So go ahead and intro our guest. I'll pull him up.
So I'm super excited about this. I'm introducing Mr. Arvin Vohra. He is the author of Pull Out, Men, Modern Life, and Mutiny, as well as many other books. He is the founder of Vohra Method Tutoring and former vice chair of the Libertarian National Committee. Welcome to the show, Arvin.
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Going on.
Absolutely. So one thing I noticed about you from the first interactions on Facebook with you is you like to say something bold and then explain it. And by the end, like people who stop at the first, like, oh my God, he can't believe he said that. It was kind of, I don't use the word triggering, but I don't know what else to say at this point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Insightful.
You know,
They're not insightful. No, that's not the word I was looking for. So
Well, I
yeah,
mean,
just
inflammatory.
controversial.
Yeah, inflammatory.
You say something, you know, somewhat like barely controversial. You go on to explain your point, and by the end of it, you're like, "Oh, I totally understand where he's coming from. He has
then it
very
becomes
valid
insightful.
points."
Yeah, sorry.
You know, but
misappropriation.
Anybody who I ever heard say anything negative was always just like, "Oh, you know, he's always trying to stir the pot," or "I can't believe he said that." And I'd ask, "Well, did you read the explanation to that?" And they would say, "Of course, you know, it would be of course not." And I'm like, "Well, then you don't understand where he's coming from." So I think that you know, you're often misunderstood and very insightful, and I think that what you have to say has a lot of value.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dre. I mean, here's the thing, right? We all have, every person has various childhood traumas, adulthood traumas that make us act irrationally. And when those things are stirred up a bit, you know, when when something brings up one of those traumas, it makes people act explosively, crazily, whatever. And that's important because that irrationality is something that as individuals we need to wrestle with, right? But also as a society and culture, we can't let those traumas determine how we run our society, how we develop our culture, how we develop our art and our fiction and our literature. We can't let that shape it. So absolutely. I mean, when I see things that just I think are absurdly silly, that are just clearly driven by nothing but sort of fear and emotion, I want to bring that to the surface, because if it's not brought to the surface, it's going to sit there and fester and create far worse problems than me upsetting a few people a couple times.
Yeah, it's just like, I always appreciate when somebody has something to say and they can explain it, and they make very, very good points. You know, I was reading your the first part of your book today that you've got out. I read some really funny bad reviews on Amazon, of course, by unverified purchasers, of course, you know, clutching their little pearls. I can't believe it's terrifying men like this exist. Oh my God. Get him out of here, guys. Oh my gosh. So, you know, I think, like, in my opinion, the feminism movement overcorrected in so far as like where we are today. Like, this should have been put to bed when we got all of the same rights and everything that men did. But
maybe a little before that.
But you know, now it's like I feel like women are more, you know, preferentially treated in society now than men, and I don't think that's fair. I think it should be. How do you think we get to an equal playing field now?
You know, one of the things that I write about in Pull Out is actually an issue of science. It's a pure scientific issue. And one of the questions came up, this is during the development of the Human Genome Project, and this is an ongoing controversy. And the question is, if you bring all this DNA information to people, one of the things that'll happen is some number of men will realize that the people they think are their biological children are not, in fact, their biological children. And so the scientific community's approach to that has been to say, okay, let's find a way to hide this information. Let's prevent, you know, this fraud from being detected. Let's prevent, you know, men from asserting their natural rights. And to me, that kind of stuff is unconscionable. I mean, can you imagine if somebody said, well, this DNA evidence is going to implicate a lot of rapists and they might go to prison, and that's bad. No, that's what you want. You want to catch criminals. You want to catch fraudsters. You want to catch the people who are doing something wrong. And yes, they absolutely should be punished. That doesn't have to be government punishment, but of course, part of that punishment would be like, yeah, their spouse probably going to leave them. And that's what should happen. That's what's supposed to happen. And what's sick is America doesn't go the furthest on this. The worst that I've heard so far has been France, which is simply banned at will paternity testing entirely, because they're worried that if people do paternity testing, they'll find out the same thing, and then that'll break up, you know, families, or like, you know, bring light to fraud. And again, what that is that's not trying to bring women up. That's just trying to keep men down.
Mm-hmm.
And if your definition of feminism is keeping men down, that's not feminism. Now, in Pull Out, there's nothing in there where I say, like, let's talk about how to keep women down, because it's not about that. It's not about keeping, like, men's rights. It's not about keeping women down. It's about bringing men up in their own internal strength. That has nothing to do with, I mean, honestly, it has nothing to do with women, except for, there's, social interaction, personal interaction. It's not about that. It's about how do you become, politically more capable or personally more capable. And I think that's what's happened is the pendulum has gone from, we need to that women should have the same rights, something I totally agree with. Women should be powerful, totally agree with that. Women should have the right to have careers and jobs or live their lives however they want to, totally agree with that. And then you come to this point where it's like, and the way to do that is to like keep men down in these various ways. And that's the part that I have a big problem with.
So do I.
I mean, I've seen the argument made that even if you can prove it's not your kid, you should still have to pay child support. I'm like, what kind of cockeyed logic is that? I've seen it on Twitter a number of times.
That's not only doing a horrible disservice to the man, but what about the kid? They don't get to know who their real father is.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what you're describing isn't just an opinion, Caleb. What you're describing is a law. I mean, that's law that says that in depending on the state, and it does vary from state to state, which is if you have not contested paternity within the first 3 years of the child's life, then you are required. So you can get divorced from the mom, and assuming that you're married, you can get divorced, but you still have to keep paying child support, and that to me is ludicrous. And you see situations where people are being required to pay child support for children that they've like never met or heard of, and women that they've like never even dated. And again, what's happening is like women are writing their name on a hospital form. The men aren't contesting it because who in their right mind is going to go to the hospital and contest every single, like go through every single birth and say like, oh, did you say I'm the father? I mean, no, dude, that's bizarre behavior. So that kind of stuff, which says like, let's just like saddle this guy with it. That to me that's not feminism. That's just trying to like keep down a group of people because of your own fears. And I'm not saying I don't get fear. Everybody has fears, but letting those fears run your life in this way, and even worse, run society and run everybody else's life, that's where we start to run into problems. And that's why, pull out, I made the title intentionally incendiary. I made the content intentionally incendiary because I want it to be something that kind of jars you out of those, old patterns of thinking.
Yeah, you talk a lot about, how the old patterns, even, when everything was in favor of men, or all the laws, everything were in favor of men, and they still kind of failed coming into this new modern era because now women have kind of the lopsided upper hand because of, the courts and what are the other things? Like, I know it's lopsided, and I know obviously family court is the worst, but what are the other?
Well, let me tell you how bad family court has gotten. This is something that somebody told me, and the person said this was saying it as a joke, but yet behind this joke, I was like, wow, it's messed up, but I kind of hear it. And the way that I told the joke is like, if I ever want to get divorced, I'm just going to kill my wife because at least I have a chance in criminal court and I have no chance in family court. Now, you're
right, though.
Serious, right? There's no way something like that would be serious. And of course, I'm sure that somebody can say, like, now Arvin Vohra is in favor of murder, which I'm obviously not. But family court is definitely a big one, right? Then you have the scientific community, which we've talked about. But a big one that I see is the way that especially for young men, for boys, information that's essential to them is being kept away from them. So a simple example, we've talked about how if you have a child, you have 3 weeks to 3 years, depending on the state, sometimes it's less, sometimes more, to contest paternity. Every single boy in the whole world should know about that. And the fact that every single boy in the whole world doesn't know about that, but has been taught, how you need to respect pronouns and stuff like that. I'm not saying that if you want to, you call somebody whatever pronoun, like depending on your beliefs, that's like kind of like your thing. But to me, this is something that's essential information for all men. We're talking about a very large percentage of men that are facing this and being uninformed. And the fact isn't just that then the men are being uninformed and people are like, oh, that's a problem, that's corrected. It's that the educational, the social establishment says, oh, men should be uninformed. It is good for men to be uninformed about their own natural rights. And that to me is the problem. That's where we're saying our goal is to keep this group of people down. So when I talk about the, when I talk about in the book a lot is you need to separate yourself from not just the political establishment, but the scientific establishment, from the educational establishment, because they don't have your back. They are not your ally. They are allied against you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pushing 30, and I just now found that out. Like from you. I didn't know that. Nobody told me that. I didn't learn that shit in school.
However, though, if you get a young lady pregnant and she puts your name on a birth certificate, the government's going to start coming after you for child care, for child support, correct? Mm-hmm. So you're going to know that somebody did this, hopefully before 3 years is up. Hopefully somebody's knocking on your door for money and you can say, hey, no, either I don't think this is mine. Let's go to court and figure it out, or something to that.
I mean, you would think, right? And so that's one of those things where you see, I mean, if this is not new, this is for everything. You see a big bias against basically men that have like lower economic status, right? So yeah, you're right. If you have your own house, your own registered address, you're registered to vote, all that kind of stuff, yeah, they'll find you in 2 days. Then you'll be like, I've never heard of this person or met this person my whole entire life. But if you don't have all that going on, right? Maybe you're not registered to vote. Maybe you're living with your parents, your aunts or grandparents or whatever. You don't have that kind of wealth, then you might not ever find this out. Mm-hmm. And so that's where this becomes something that's very, very skewed against men of lower economic status, compared to those that have, their own houses and they're registered to vote and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of, especially younger men, that will bounce around from place to place, and they're never at a place long enough for the government or anyone else to be able to catch up with where they're at. So that's a fair point there.
Those couch surfers.
Couch surfers. Hey, you got to do it sometimes. It is what it is, right?
Sure.
Sorry, Dre, you looked like you had a question there. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I did not, actually. I was just looking to see if we had any comments. So it's just us right now. Paul. Hi, Paul. Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but I don't know.
I'm sorry. I'm reading comments.
I don't know. Monkey see, monkey do. We got that one. Or hear no evil, see no, whatever that saying is. So I have been following your Facebook posts a lot lately, Arvin. I think they're fucking hilarious. How you just go out of your way. So what goes into writing these posts? Is it just how do I piss a bunch of people off today, or is it like what's behind it?
Well, there's a few things, right? I mean, I usually start off by checking the news, and here's what I'm looking for in the news. I'm looking for the piece that doesn't fit, or I'm listening to conversation, just listening to what doesn't fit here, like what doesn't make sense, right? Yeah, you'll see a lot of things in politics that make perfect sense. Someone's like, yeah, I have student loans and I want somebody else to pay for them, so I'm going to advocate that. Like that to me doesn't require any special explanation, right?
Right.
But
you get it.
Yeah, I mean, that I'm just like, yeah, no kidding. So that's basic, human nature. But when I see something, I'm like, wait, something here is a little bit off. That's what I'm looking for, because that's the thing that is going to most likely that's going to expose some deep-seated irrationality. And I think that is, both as an educator and as a political activist, I view it as part of what I need, what my job is essentially, to find those kinds of irrationalities, to go after them, to present them, to say, like, look at this thing. When, the stuff we've been talking about, with paternity testing and all, it's interesting when I talk about this on various social media platforms, it gets a lot of pushback. I mean, so many people are like, well, yeah, but I mean, you should have checked the form. And that kind of, that mindset that says this is okay, that to me tells me there's a lot more going on in here than you might think. And one of the things, especially talking about paternity, it's, it occurs to me that if we accept this idea that if you're a man that like did not have anything to do with producing a child, that has never met the child, has never met the mother, then you shouldn't be paying child support. If we accept that premise, then that's like the first domino to rejecting the entire welfare state, right? Because that's what the welfare state is. I mean, anybody has a child anywhere. I and you guys all have to pay child support. We don't call it that, but it's essentially child support. We had nothing to do with it. We like literally never met any of the people involved in any way whatsoever. And so this connection between these very strange paternity laws, I mean, the idea that you can't get a paternity test in France unless a court orders it, that does not fit with like Western human rights understanding. You know what I mean?
That's
but
insane.
when I see that, I'm like, all right, that's the piece.
Is it very difficult? Like if a man is like, whoa, no, this lady did not have my child. Is it difficult for Frenchmen to?
Incredibly difficult. So the first year that they did this, so in order to get the paternity test, you first have to get the court order. And the first year, out of the I don't know how many thousands, maybe millions of people that requested it, they approved like 1,500.
Jeez, how long has this been a law?
In the country. And so I
don't think it's been that long.
Sure, if it's like something absurd, right, where you're just like, I've literally never seen this person my entire life. Sure, in that case, I imagine they'd be pretty lenient. But if you're just like, you know what, I'm just suspicious and I want to know that from what the numbers have said and from what the reports on the ground have been, from what my own understanding is, that doesn't happen. And so again, they're saying that if you are the victim of a fraud, you don't have the right to any kind of redress, including just finding out whether or not you're the victim of a fraud. And so again, that to me is a piece that doesn't fit. If that was going on in Saudi Arabia, I'd be like, yeah, nobody there has any rights, so I'm not surprised. When that's going on in France, and when Germany's saying like, yeah, that sounds pretty good, we want to consider that too, that to me is something that doesn't add up. That is not how Western democracies are supposed to work. That's not what human rights are like. I mean, that's not normal. And so I want to explore that piece, because that piece is going to be hiding some kind of false belief.
How long has that been a law for?
The France law, it's been at least a few years.
Okay.
It's not a new law.
I was just looking up their population. They have about 67.5 million people. So 1,500 is a tiny number.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, and you got to imagine, people with kids of all ages were wanting to get that figured out. You know what I mean? Because you never know at what point you start to question what.
Well, that was just the first year he said the law went into effect.
Yeah. My guess is it's probably gone down. I don't have this year's statistics like at my fingertips, but it is something where, they've been cracking down on all kinds of things. People just like circumvent the law using something like 23andMe. Again, France has been cracking down on things like that to prevent people from getting basic information. And here's the problem with doing that. In addition to preventing people from being able to seek redress for fraud, it also prevents people from finding other things. Like, do I have a genetic situation that I should be worried about? Do my kids have a genetic situation that they should be worried about? Are there things we can do right now? So it's the obsession with preventing men from finding out the truth is disproportionate. And again, I really do believe that the understanding, the subconscious or maybe conscious understanding, is that if you accept the idea that you shouldn't have to pay for something that's literally not your kid, that you've never seen or met before ever, if you accept that idea, you're kind of throwing out this deep underpinning of the welfare state. And once you have that first domino, that's all we need to start really dismantling this idea of the welfare state.
That's just so bizarre. The whole law is just so bizarre to me. Was it written, like you said, under the guise of, well, this will help keep families together?
Yeah, they said it would cause that mass paternity testing could lead to social disruption, which, yeah, it probably would. But I'm like, that's the point. You know what I mean?
What was that a pre-existing problem in France? Was there a shit ton of run on the DNA courts to say,
you can do it here?
I don't know if. Sure, yeah, you can, but they make it sound like there was a bunch of people doing it, so they had to stop it or something. You know what I mean?
The costs were going down. So, like, as what you see in any kind of tech that's not subsidized by the government, as the cost starts to go down. And when paternity tests stopped costing $2,000 and started costing $200 and started costing $100, then you're going to see a huge increase in the quantity demanded. And so I think seeing that writing on the wall, I'm sure there were court cases here and there where people are like, well, it's not my kids, so I'm out. When you see that kind of stuff happening, I think it was just a preventative measure. And I think if your goal is to prevent anybody from finding out the truth, then yeah, that's when you do it. When the technology becomes affordable, that's when you would block it. But that, to me, that technology being affordable is good. The truth is good. And again, that's not to say that somebody couldn't choose at that point to say, you know what, I've been raising this kid for the last 8 years. It's not biologically my kid, but I consider him my kid anyway. I'm divorcing the mom, but I still want to look after the kid. That is a choice. But the idea of removing the choice, that to me is the area where where you step out of the normal understanding of human rights and into this totally other bizarre way of approaching life.
Yeah, and I had to stop myself there. I was going to say we have access to rapid paternity testing in the U.S., and we don't have a breakdown of the family unit, but we do. But that's nothing to do with paternity testing. That's more the government stepping in and playing dad. So replacing the father in the family unit. That's been a design since the 70s and 80s that they've carried out quite well. It's one of the things our government's done efficiently. So just adding that up.
Yeah, and the sad thing about having the government play the role of father, which it has been, is
they've done it poorly, but they've removed the fathers efficiently.
Yeah. And that's the thing, people always say, like, how, when we talk about homeschooling, they say, like, how could just a parent possibly provide better education in the school? And, they have less training. Oh yeah, they have less training, but they care more. And when it comes down to it, I'm the person that cares more about whatever project it is, that person will do it better. And the thing about having the government play dad is the government doesn't care about the kids at all. And so it plays dad in a way that suits the government, but isn't in any way good for the kids. So the government playing dad means what? It means, raising kids to basically become cannon fodder, raising kids to support the military industrial complex. It means, creating a generational welfare dependency. It means doing everything like that. Because, if you don't care about the kids, you only care about your own political lobbyists and cronies and all that, you're going to favor your cronies, not these kids that you don't care about.
Yeah, you're going to do anything, whatever that furthers your political career and keeps your pockets full. So what do you think are the other major detriments right now in our society for men, other than, the awful family court system and, in some instances, women being able to just say, hey, that's the dad, and end of story. What are the other the biggest detriments to men and men's rights, other than, men having, 99% of the most difficult and dangerous jobs?
Suicides.
Oh, and the suicide rate for men versus women.
So that's like a thing that I definitely talk about in the book, and I've talked about outside the book as well, which is, this idea, there are these sort of stereotypes that men are being fed, which are very, very, very toxic. And I don't use it in like the current sense. I mean, like the literal sense of toxic. Simple example, we talk about, like the idea of the man as like the strong, silent type. That to me is a description of a donkey. When you look at the great leaders of human history, they weren't silent. They said something. And so we see this idea of men being told that they need to basically shut the hell up all the time. And that, of course, has the exact consequence for mental health that you would expect it to do. If you tell people to shut up, then they're going to shut up and things are going to be kept bottled up. This idea that's being taught to men that, any kind of inwards thought, whether that's, through therapy or just like introspection, is somehow weak and feminine. Again, that's like setting up people intentionally to have problems. That's like literally saying don't learn math. Learning about yourself.
Setting up for failure. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just so backwards.
People wonder why there's such an uptick in mass shootings. Look at the majority of the people committing them are men. And look at how our attitude towards men has changed over the past 50 years. AR-15s, you used to be able to order an AR-15 in the Sears catalog. It'd show up at your door like an Amazon package. Those have been around forever. A dude walking into a school with one and just mowing everybody down, that's only been around for 20-ish years. So
since they made them soft targets.
Yeah, there's that too. But we've broken an entire generation of boys.
Yeah, there's something very broken there. And I think a lot of it comes down to this increasing recognition that you don't, whether you're a man or a woman, you don't have real economic power, and that you don't have the power to say no. None of us on this podcast, nobody listening to this podcast can say, I've earned this money, you can't have it. I can give it to you or not give it. That's my choice. Nobody here has the choice to say no. So that diminishes the fundamental nature of economic power. And when you take away economic power, and I think economic power is great, because to have economic power, you first have to do something that at least one person in the world finds valuable, right?
Yeah.
When you take away that economic power, you see very toxic behavior for both men and women. For men, you see primarily, if you're like, well, if I can't have economic power, then I'm left with physical force, violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for women, it's usually, if I don't have economic power, I'm going to turn to sexual power. And that's where you see Instagram, OnlyFans, things like that exploding. Because again, the thirst for power, that's inherent to the human species. I mean, we are the apex predator of this planet. We're supposed to want power. And when we can't want good power, we want bad power. And we saw the exact same thing in the Soviet Union. When people couldn't have economic power, they learned to be crafty and devious and backstabbing and corrupt and all that kind of stuff. We see that now in Cuba. When you can't have economic power, you learn these very like low-level sort of survival and manipulation strategies instead of these ennobling economic strategies. So I think that people are recognizing that economic power has been diminished. And I think once we stop diminishing economic power, we end the income tax, we end the welfare state especially. We say that that economic power, that's something you earn and you keep and it's yours. That's going to pull people away from, either violence or sexual power and more towards economic power.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look at the COVID lockdowns. It's another perfect example. The government basically said, we can own you. We can shut down your source of income and make you completely dependent on us, or you can get fucked. I mean, it depends. Not everyone got a stimulus check that needed one. It's exactly it. It destroyed people's mental health and mental well-being. Alcoholism is skyrocketed. Suicide attempts have gone way up since the lockdowns. Mass shootings have gone way up. Just violent crime in general has gone way. The list goes on and on. And it's exactly right. When you take away people's economic power and ability to, provide for themselves and their families, it just ruins them mentally.
Yeah, and again, it's, we have to say, like, what is it good for us as individuals to seek? What is it good for a society to have the individuals in that society seek? And productivity has never hurt any culture, any society. When you look at very productive societies, they also have other good things. They also have they have more culture, they have more entertainment, they have all this kind of stuff. Whereas if a society is economically downtrodden, like living in this like spiral of like shame and self-loathing and all that kind of stuff that you see in a lot of really impoverished cultures, what you're seeing there is this upwards ladder has been taken away. And you're just like, well, I'm like here now and there's no way for me to be anywhere else. Like, what can you do at that point? You can do violence, you can drink, and that's basically it. And so like, what you're saying when you talk about like taking away people's livelihood through a lot of these lockdowns and whatnot, again, that's a way to keep a group of people oppressed and not recognizing their own power. It's, I remind people when I talk to them, either in one-on-one or, in other formats, we're the apex predator of this planet. I mean, human beings are incredibly powerful. Each human being is an incredibly powerful person themselves. And the only way to control a large number of human beings, the only way to keep them down is to make them just forget how incredible they are, to make them forget how powerful they are. And so a lot of these things that we talk about, it's not, when we talk about men's rights, it's not about like, let's oppress women. It's not about that at all. It's about, let's remember that power that we have. Let's tap into that power that we have, that economic power, that, physical strength, that intelligence that we have as human beings, that wisdom we can develop over time. Let's tap into that. So often people, because they don't want to be controlled, they're like, well, I don't want to be controlled. So my approach to not being controlled is to just act like a crazy person all the time, which of course makes you easier to control. And I say, let's get rid of that mindset. Let's say, I want to be more organized, not less organized. I want to be more capable, not less capable. I want to work harder, not less. I want to be more than I was, not less than I was. Because again, there's always more power through strength than through just kind of craziness, which has been the unfortunate norm. As we strip away that economic power, more and more people are turning to various types of lunatic acting out.
Yeah. And you mentioned OnlyFans there. I wanted to go back to that. I mean, obviously, like he said, women turn to sexual power when there's no economic power. What do you think's created the market of men for it? Is it just a generation of people that have just become so socially inept they don't know how to talk to women, so they just resort to paying for porn? Or I mean, what's the heart of that issue that's created?
I don't, as a woman, I don't understand, because I know that there's obviously a plethora of free porn out there, and the only difference between OnlyFans, as I understand it, is there's some personal interaction. So you guys shine the light for me. I don't get it.
I think when you're looking at addiction, there's various types of addiction, right? You know, over here at Bohr Method, we study addiction a lot because, you know, we work with teenagers. We work to try to help them improve their academics, which means we do have to look at addiction. We have to consider addiction. And for addiction to exist, you really need to have two things. One, you need to have a lot of negative emotions. And two, you need to have something that can temporarily turn those things off. You know, one of the best quotes I've heard about addiction is this: people believe that the things you're addicted to, whatever it is, whether it's drugs or gambling or whatever, that those make you feel euphoric. But the reality is the euphoria has always been inside of you. All those things are doing is temporarily turning off the negative emotions. Mm-hmm. And so in these cases, what are the negative emotions? Disempowerment, right? Shame, guilt, whatever. I mean, but the big one is that fear that so many people feel about so many things all the time. And where does that fear come from? Well, some of it's just life. You know, life can be scary. We have childhood traumas, all that kind of stuff. But a lot of that fear has been intentionally built into our society. We have various tools that are trying to intentionally make people afraid. And you've already talked about COVID, which, you know, the government, in my view, has latched onto and tried to use to just generate one trauma response after another. But you see the same thing from the media, like, you know, kind of this fear mongering, constantly trying to create fear. And here's the thing: that fear paves the way for addiction. Mm-hmm. Because the thing you're addicted to will turn off the fear temporarily. And if you're always afraid all the time, being unafraid for 5 minutes is amazing. So I think that when we look at addiction, we have to look at an unnatural level of fear that is being generated intentionally and how we can fight against that. And some of that fear is coming from the media. Some of it's coming from social media. I mean, there's the research that shows that Instagram is creating this fear and anxiety among especially teenage girls, but also among teenage boys, that all of this stuff is fueling that thing, which then seeks release through various types of addiction. I think OnlyFans is just like and one more type of addiction to a society that has increasingly become dependent on that kind of addiction.
And that's my thing is I've spoken out on multiple podcasts about porn and stuff like that. I don't think the concept of it, and just like alcohol, gambling, drugs, in moderation, I don't think it's damaging. I think it's, you know, when it becomes overused, that's when it becomes an issue, obviously. But I think, excuse me, my issue with porn is it's not just damaging to men, it's damaging to women as well, just as damaging, you know, by proxy for the men that abuse it. It creates unrealistic standards for women. It makes men perform worse with their wives, girlfriends, whatever the case may be. And it's just harmful to us as a society. And the fact that it's become just so readily available at will, I think is truly, and I'm far from a Bible thumping conservative, but I think it's truly just part of what's the rot and decay that we have in our society today.
And again, I mean, what you see with pornography is, I mean, just by definition, it is an escape from reality, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And so the question is, why when escapes from reality become not just like essential, but like constantly essential, it means that the person feels that they have no influence on their own reality. Now, that could be just their imagination. They might think that they have no influence over their reality, or it can be true, which maybe they don't have any influence over their own reality. And I think there's a mix right now. I think that when people feel just stripped of their economic power, the economic power being what we use to shape reality, I think at that point, more and more people say, well, there's nothing I can do. I could, earn money, but they'll just take it away and give it to somebody who didn't earn it or didn't deserve it, or I didn't want to give it to. There's nothing, that feeling that there's like nothing you can do. And at that point, when somebody hits that point of ultimate defeat, that point that says, I can't do anything, so why try, is when every type of escapism, whether that's pornography or gambling or drugs, whatever it is, suddenly goes from something that's hobbyistic to something that's a survival tool. And I think that's where you see that cultural rot through economic devastation and the sort of psychological damage that comes from any addiction. You see, and here's the thing. I mean, there's a lot of pornography in the United States, but in a lot of other countries that have more economic problems, there's actually more of it. I mean, you see in the Dominican Republic, for example, there's porn just everywhere. I mean, people just watch it on their cell phones, just walking around. It's just
in public.
Just like in public, just hanging out, and it's not just adults, it's just like little kids just like watching it, because again, the more hopeless a group of people feel, the more the addictive thing becomes just like a survival tool, no longer an entertainment device. And that's not just, that's not just limited to the Dominican Republic. You'll see that in like many countries. Right. Like the worse the country is doing, the fewer opportunities that people in the country have, the more you see people turning to some kind of addiction, right? And so I think that what America's like, as a cultural leader, as a world leader, needs to really say is, how can we ensure that people here are able to use their own economic power? And the way, in my mind, to achieve that is by ending all taxation, ending the welfare state. And that doesn't mean we end charity. Of course, it means we increase charity. It means we become active in charity. It means we do charity with love and kindness rather than being like coerced to do it against our will in ways that just don't make any sense. And I think once you see that transformation, when people say when people not realize, it's almost like when people just remember what it means, what an incredible thing it is to just be a human being. When people remember that, that's where you see that empowerment happen. When you say, oh, I don't need to shoot up a school. Maybe I could work to help educate some kids. Maybe I could work to make this a better building. Maybe I could do something good instead of this sort of futile, self-destructive act of utter nihilism.
Mm-hmm. And this is a question it's just always interested me to get people's opinions, and there's no right or wrong answer. Everyone throws the studies out that violence in media, like movies, video games, etc., doesn't have a damaging effect on men, specifically young men. I just find it hard to believe. I mean, do you seem to think that just the easy access to violence, just constant violence in our society, specifically in media and entertainment, has any type of negative effect on not just young men, but young women or young men and women, excuse me?
Well, I think it's like this, right? If you have an empty, let's say you have a math textbook, right? And it's nothing but empty pages. It's not going to hurt anybody's math skills, but it's also not going to help them. It's just empty pages. And I think that when you see this message that says every problem should be solved with violence, and that's the problem, right? We're saying, oh my God, the hero has a problem. I mean, that's storytelling, right? The hero has a problem is like the beginning of any great story or any bad story. The hero has a problem, and if the answer every single time is so he's going to blow it up, aside from maybe all that's going to do is prevent people from learning things that make any sense. And there are other ways, if you look at literature through the ages, classical literature, American literature that was, before, modern Hollywood stuff, heroes find other ways to solve problems besides just blowing stuff up, right? Yeah. And so that creates that mindset that so feeds into the most influential part of our sector, the military-industrial complex, the defense contractors, because that's what they want people to believe. They say, look, those people are dangerous. Let's blow them up. Let's sign up to blow them up. Let's spend more taxes to blow them up. Again, that mindset that, I don't believe that entertainment should be just like a lecture, right?
Right.
But I do believe that entertainment, that literature is something that should speak fundamentally to the human condition in a way that's honest, in a way that's authentic. And yes, we are the apex predator of the planet, but that doesn't mean our first, last, and only option in any conflict situation is violence. There should be other things. So in that, I do believe that the media is essentially doing a kind of brainwashing. Like every movie has become an ad for when in doubt, use violence. And therefore has also become an ad for when in doubt, let's use the military.
Yeah.
So
right,
yes,
because they forget to include that. Yeah, while we are the apex predator, we're also the most intelligent species on the planet, and we can use our brains to solve things without violence. There's many avenues we can use prior to violence. So Arvin,
that Hollywood CIA connection. Sorry,
I kind of have to ask, since you wrote this book and everything, on a personal level, if you don't mind, are you married? Are you involved? Do you have kids?
Oh, no, I'm married.
You are?
Yeah.
Good for you. Congratulations. Yeah. How long have you been married?
I'm married a little bit over a year.
Oh, nice.
Oh, so you're newlywed. Okay, good for you.
I'll be in that crew soon too.
Nice.
Yeah, Caleb just popped the question like about a week ago.
2 or 3.
Finally.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
That's yeah. So I mean, I think what I kind of had the same question. Was there anything in particular that inspired you? Was it just, observations going on in society, things you've seen personally? I mean,
it started as kind of a joke, right? So, I'd recently read, Lean In, Women Work, and the Will to Lead. And I was like, can you imagine if we turned it backwards, call it Pull Out? And I was just joking around with some friends, right?
I love it.
And I was like, honestly, that actually might not be a bad idea. And then I started, I was, I'd really started to notice some things that just didn't really add up, right? And I really started thinking about a lot of stuff. And one of the big things that really encouraged me to really get into it was seeing the way that these sort of fundamental mythological patterns had been hijacked. One thing that I think is very much a part of male culture through all of human history has been rites of passage. And the type of rite of passage that a society has determines what their definition of a man is as compared to a boy. So if it's a strength test, then we believe that men are stronger than boys. And if it's an intelligence test, we believe that men are more intelligent, or whatever it is. But I started to see that a lot of these rites of passage had been hijacked, and they'd been hijacked by 2 groups. One was college and one was military. And the way that I picked up on this, like the subtle way that the military was hijacking the rites of passage, is I saw a commercial for the Marines where they just literally said, it's a rite of passage. It's just, they've taken this thing, and this thing that's been like this amazing part of male culture, this, transition from a boy to a man, and, done something that I think that's pretty awful with it, which is kind of like replace it with this other fake version. And so you end up with people who have gone through a fake rite of passage, who feel confused and traumatized, who, of course, if you look at the suicide rate among military, it's going up and up and up. And of course it's going up and up and up, because it's like you're mentally hijacking people and manipulating them in such a very personal way, right? And so I think that, when I started to see these types of things, when I was talking about the problems of military recruitment, I saw the huge amount of triggering that was leading to, I felt that letting that stand and saying nothing at all was much more complicit than I was willing to be. And so that's what kind of took it from just like a ridiculous joke among friends to something that, really came to fruition.
Good for you, because, a lot of people say that it is predatory to have the recruiters in high school. These kids' brains are not fully developed. They're signing away, possibly their life at 17, 18, sometimes 16 years old. And I don't think it's fair. And I think that I know recruiters lie. I know they do.
Absolutely.
I sat in a room with my daughter. She was considering National Guard, and I have other recruiters that are actually in the family for other branches of the military. And I asked, and they're like, yeah, that's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. And I'm like, okay, my daughter, I'm like, you can't do this. I'm sorry. Like, there's just no way. Because they told her, they made promise, you'll get this, that, and the other, but you'll never have to do this, this, or this. And the lies were abundant, and it's sad.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. And people say that the military recruiters shouldn't be in schools, and I absolutely agree. They shouldn't be in schools, because it's not just a military thing. like over here, in my business at Vohra Method, I mean, it's not that I don't think that like cereal has any place in education, but if I started turning like the first 20 minutes of every class into an ad for Cheerios, that would be misusing education. That'd be misunderstanding what education is, because education is not about forcing your opinion on somebody else, whether that's a commercial opinion, whether that's a political opinion, or whether it's a recruitment opinion. Education is about equipping people to make their own decisions. It's about teaching people, developing the skills you need for critical thinking. And whether the skills are, mathematical or grammatical or whatever, that's the job of education. So the idea of, military recruitment in schools is heinous to me, not just because I think that military recruitment is generally a bad idea, but it's because advertising itself of any subject has no place in the classroom. That's not what it's for. Political propaganda has no place in the classroom. Again, that's not what a classroom is for. It's supposed to be this like a sacred space where you're trying to actually build the human mind, not take advantage of the human mind. I mean, just imagine if at the beginning of every sermon, a priest said, let me tell you guys why you all need to go out and buy this car. And, here's the commission that I'm getting. I mean, it's just wrong at this fundamental. So I absolutely agree for a variety of reasons that should never be happening.
So when do you think it's appropriate for recruiters at what age do you think it's appropriate for recruiters to approach people for the military?
What age do I think it's appropriate? See, that's where we get into like a very complex area, right? What age is somebody an adult? And I think that the anarcho-capitalist definition of adult is the right definition. And that definition says, or my version of that definition says, that an adult is somebody who is biologically an adult and, more importantly, economically an adult. So if there's somebody who's, say, 16 years old, they're running their own business, they have their own job, they have their own house, and the military comes up to them and says, do you want to join the military? That, to me, perfectly fine, because that person is in every functional understanding an adult. On the other hand, you have a 16-year-old living at their parents' house, going like a regular 16-year-old, right? They're going to school. They've never
just
like
play video games. Yeah,
they play video games. Like that's a kid. I mean, the two people are the same age, but to me, one's an adult and one's a kid. And so the question is, should a kid be making that level of decision? And I would say absolutely not. There's no circumstance. A kid, which means somebody that is for the most part, primarily not an economic adult. Like they don't have a job
supporting themselves.
You know what I mean? They haven't faced reality in that way. That person should not be approached for something that severe and that serious. That is not a decision that somebody who's not an adult could possibly make in a rational way. There's no way that somebody like that could make it. So, yeah, I mean, if you have some 16-year-old like rock superstar living in a huge mansion, the military says like, hey, do you want to join? He's like, yeah. You know what? He earned it. He has the right. He is an adult. He's set up. He's living his life. And if he wants to do something that I might think is a little bit stupid, that's his right. But somebody else, I think absolutely not.
Yeah, just like how 5-year-olds shouldn't be allowed to transition, Fox News.
I would also agree with that. Again,
did Fox News say they should?
Fox News aired a thing last week, going on and on about. We'll talk about it on another episode, but yeah, going on and on about how the 4-year-old transgender that was born a boy in a woman's body, and the mom knew it because he didn't like blue clothes or pink clothes. Yeah. They didn't portray it like a freak show either. So yeah.
Yeah, and so again, like that's where we have to be like, we have to say like what makes somebody adult enough to make that kind of decision? And again, I do think that they're a biological adult and economic adult. So if someone's like, 35 or 15 and lives in their own house, they have their own job, they've shown they can like economically survive, they're biologically grown up. They have, their own like house and car and all that. And that person says, I believe that I'm this other gender. I want to like have these surgeries. I'm going to pay for it. To me, there's no one that I still think it's a bad idea. Sure. I don't think anyone else has any say in it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Whereas if somebody's 4 and not a biological adult, and presumably not an economic adult, that
and is going to say tomorrow that they feel like a tractor or a fire truck.
Again, that to me there's no real way you could argue that person could make such a complex adult decision. Now, one of the things is because of the work that I do, work with a lot of kids on things like reading comprehension and all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you get a sense of like what level of abstraction can somebody of a different age understand, right?
Sure.
And the idea that a 4-year-old could have an understanding of something as abstract as gender to identify it and say it's wrong, I mean, that's ludicrous. That would be the smartest 4-year-old in the history of 4-year-olds. Even an 8-year-old, I've never worked with a single, and remember, I work with like super high achieving students, right? Most of my students are 3, 4, 5 grades ahead.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, what is the age range that you work with? How young and how?
Yeah, my students are usually between about 8 and about 18. And
okay.
I work with like very high achieving, very competitive students. I mean, most of my students are trying to get into Ivy League colleges. Most of them do get into Ivy League college. I mean, these are, very, very highly ambitious students. And, we're talking about people who, by and large, almost all of my students have about 1,500 SAT scores. And I mean, maybe some of the seniors might be able to articulate that, but like probably not, certainly not most. And when it comes to the kids that are like in 7th, 8th grade, just no chance. I mean, I've just never, ever seen anything like that. I've seen students that could parrot back the talking points for sure.
Sure.
Really authentically come to that. I've never, ever, I can't imagine it.
Well, that's refreshing to hear because I know it's the truth, but it's nice to hear it from an educator. I mean, I'm a parent. My daughter is now a grown adult. I'm aging myself here, but she's 28. And I couldn't imagine taking her seriously at 4 years old at anything. She's, she's 4.
Yeah, and
she wants gummy bears for lunch. She's like,
one of the things that I think is very true what you see from young children, especially in education, is the idea of conflating structure and function, right? So, you'll see very young kids, for example, they might think that a ladder is stairs because they're just like, it's a thing you go up on. And they might also think an elevator is stairs because of the thing. And you have to say, well, no, it's like structurally different or whatever. And so what is more common is that a lot of times young kids want to do something that they believe is associated with a different type of gender or just like a different animal or whatever. And so they say they want to be a bear. I mean, they just want to be big and strong. And it's great to be big and strong. And there's ways you can get bigger and stronger, but that doesn't make you a bear. That just makes you big and strong. That's just their way of expressing it because little kids confuse nouns and verbs all the time. This is what they do. That is their number one most favorite hobby in the universe. So of course there'll be plenty of kids that say well, I'm a boy. You said that, or I've observed through my own observation that women cook, but I want to know how to cook. So I am also a woman. I mean, that type of thing is what is the kind of logic that goes in there. So it's not this deep understanding of identity. It's just superficial logic gone awry. And as adults, it's our job to not let that determine big, huge, giant medical decisions.
Right. That could alter their life forever, like they were talking about some of the drugs that they give will, are chemical castration. They can ever.
That's what you use. Lupron's used for 2 things. It's used as a puberty blocker. It's used for chemical castration. That's what it's for.
And I will say that there are some rare, but there are some instances where kids do need hormone or puberty blockers, but that's for a legitimate physical medical condition.
So when there's so there are certain situations where we have early onset puberty.
Yes.
It can be caused by certain chemicals, and can just be caused by genetics, be caused by just a lot of things. And so in that case, you're trying to prevent a 5-year-old from going through puberty when he's 5. You're not trying to prevent him from going through puberty when he's 15.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that's, I do want to say, I remember 5-6 years ago, you caught a lot of shit for bashing government schools. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people have kind of been red-pilled on that. You were a little ahead of your time. Given that a lot of people just run-of-the-mill conservatives that are whoa, drag queen story hour. What the hell? It took them a little bit, and it wasn't like that 6 years ago, but you did a great job of articulating how slippery of a slope we were on, and it was only inevitably going to lead to this kind of groomer nonsense that you see today.
Yeah, I told a lot of folks at convention, I said, like, here's my goal. I said, right now, and this was a couple of years ago, I said, right now, if somebody says who in the LP is the most opposed to marijuana, to banning marijuana, who in the LP is most opposed to drug prohibition, no one could really answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody said at the time, who in the LP is most opposed to government schools, most people would say me. And what I want is for that question to be impossible to answer. If somebody says who hates government schools the most, they'll be like, I don't know, everybody. There's who. How would you answer a question like that? That's the goal for the libertarian. That's one of my goals for the libertarian movement. And I think we are much farther along on that than I ever thought we would have gotten in a decade, let alone this just tiny time period that it's been. So I mean, it has been gratifying to see a lot of that change. Even LP National, which has usually been a little bit shy about that topic, they've been fairly open on Twitter. They've been just talking about abolishing government schools. And so that kind of change, I think, is sort of like what makes a lot of the earlier suffering worth it.
For sure. No, it's crazy how you've been vindicated in just about everything you said about government schools. I'll give you props for it. That's one of the few things that people are just very defensive of. There's a couple. I mean, the military is another one, but government schools, if that's not number one, it's 2 or at least 1B to the military. And you were out on the forefront being like, look, this is nonsense. This is going to collapse. And sure enough, now you got a bunch of people waking up going, holy shit, it did. It really did. Wow.
Yeah. We're actually in a couple of months, we're going to be doing an updated re-release of my first book, which was called The Equation for Excellence, How to Make Your Child Excel at Math. And writing a bunch of updates specifically because, when I wrote The Equation for Excellence, just like, writing a book for homeschoolers was just like would be writing a book for like 5 people. There just wasn't, there wasn't any earthly reason to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where today, those numbers are skyrocketing. And it's always been a guide for parents. But now when you have parents that are also teachers, they're the teachers of their own kids. It's so amazing to see both the potential of what can happen and also what is already actually happening. I work with homeschool students at Vohra Method, and it's amazing. I mean, you see kids coming in that are 3, a lot of my students are several years ahead, like after working really hard with me on a lot of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm talking about people coming in, they're already 3-4 years ahead. It's amazing to see it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I think that's like what this is about. I mean, like again, it's true that I fairly frequently trigger people. I don't do it like just to do it.
Yeah.
There is a reason for it, right?
That's my wheelhouse.
But I love seeing it. I love it because it's like you didn't even read the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like the unverified, bullshit. Like I don't even want to hear it.
And I did have one other question before we let you go, because we've taken up over an hour of your time here. So I think the setback that scares a lot of people about the concept of homeschooling isn't necessarily being hooked on the government tip. Well, I guess more or less it could be. But the big concern I see from a lot of people is, what would you say to the average, nuclear family of 4, mom and dad have a combined household income of $100,000 or whatever's middle class in that area, that if they lose one of those incomes, they're going to struggle. Like they're going to be facing eviction every month. One bad thing with the house, one medical bill, etc. goes wrong. So how
do they get into?
You're out on the streets. Yeah. How do you get into a position where
they can't personally do it themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the simplest way to start looking at this is if you're a parent and you have kids and their kids are in school, you're already homeschooling. You're already watching them work 4 or 5 hours a day on their homework.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, you're doing somebody else's bad homeschooling. You're taking the worst tools and giving the worst type of homeschooling because you're letting somebody else make the decisions for you. Homeschooling does not take 12 hours a day.
Sure.
Nothing in the world takes 12 hours a day. I mean, professional football players don't train 12 hours a day.
Nope.
Right.
I mean, investment bankers don't work 12 hours a day. They pretend like they do, but they don't work 12 hours a day. I mean, if you include all the breaks and all that.
Bathroom breaks, cigarettes, coffee. Yeah.
So homeschooling does not take 12 hours a day. It takes about 4 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what that means for people where both parents are working is that you have kind of a flipped thing which is what we would call homework is done during the day, and sort of the guidance from the parents is done during the evening. The other thing to realize is homeschooling doesn't mean that you're the teacher. It's more like you're the headmaster. You choose the materials, you choose the teachers, you choose the lectures, you make those decisions. You make those decisions actually with your kid instead of like at your kid. And so as a real simple example, one of the decisions that school boards make is what textbooks to use. They usually choose the Pearson ones, which are the worst ones, but are the ones that have the biggest lobbyists behind them.
Mm-hmm.
If you're homeschooling, you have to pick a different textbook. Most people pick the Saxon books because they're good.
Yeah.
And so once you pick that book, I mean, that's it. It's like you picked it. It's like you don't pick a new, algebra book every single day. So a lot of these homeschooling is not as like intensive as people think it is. It is not like giving 6 hours of academic lecture per day to your kids. It's nothing to do with that, because that's their system. Like that academic lecture classroom stuff, that's their thing, and it doesn't work. Homeschooling is like, how do we actually achieve this? So the one advice I give to homeschool parents is this: don't focus on the process, focus on the goals. What are the goals you want? If your goals are algebra mastery, now figure out how to get algebra mastery. Don't figure out how to spend 9 months doing algebra. Figure out how to get to mastery. And there's a lot of tools that we provide at Board Method for free at aphomeschool.com. There's stuff from the Equation for Excellence in the new release that's coming out in a few months. There's plenty of other free programs online. There's paid programs on. There's so much you can do that will let you choose your own good program. It's kind of like, it's a lot like cooking. Even if you're a bad cook, you can still learn to make much healthier and eventually much tastier food than the garbage you get at most restaurants. Because again, it's not because you have more skill or experience, it's because you care more. And if you care more about your kids than government schools do, which you probably do, you're going to end up with something better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my God. What a great way to put that.
It was excellent.
All right, let's end on that. And after the show, I have a very funny story to tell you, Arvin.
All right.
That's his book down there on the
banner.
Yes,
check it out.
Where is it available at?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble. I mean, basically just everywhere.
Gotcha.
Yeah, don't read those unverified purchase reviews, because they're nothing but funny bullshit.
Yeah, there are a few brigade reviews, which is when a group of people comes in and puts a bunch of negative reviews. And in fairness,
we know all about that
deleting
on
those.
this page.
Yeah, you guys know about that. So in fairness, Amazon's pretty good about deleting those, because they're like, this person has never purchased a book. This review seems to have no relevance to the book. But still a few. I mean, if you put in 50 fake reviews, a couple will slip through, and a couple have slipped through.
Yeah.
I think that people are looking at this book. They're the type of people that'll think critically and say, like, that's obviously a fake review.
Sure.
Let me actually make my own mind up on that.
Yep.
Sure.
And yeah, all the verified reviews were positive and thoughtful. So at least there's that.
There is that, yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, guys.
All right.
We will wrap this up, and we will see you next week with comedian and screenwriter. And look up her IMDb. She's
Actress.
all over the place. Actress Wendy Wilkins.
Yep. And
Same time next week.
I don't have any dates. I got a couple things in the works, though. We'll plug it when they're available. So
work harder, Caleb.
Oh, it's the summer. It's the dead time for comedy. So this is my rest time. But yeah. All right.
Okay.
Peace out, y'all. Thank you so much.